Communication without borders is a very timely theme for the public relations profession because there's no doubt that the profession is now totally global.
The tools and the channels we have available to us now are very, very different to the tools and channels that we had 5-6 years ago.
All these social media platforms have just allowed people to be much closer, to tighten their networks and broaden their networks, and that's really what borderless means. No barriers to communications.
I've been involved in campaigns this year that have had implications in New York, in Pakistan, in Brunei, all over the world, and yet I've done this in the most isolated city in the world, in Perth.
It really breaks down the barriers that had existed in the past where people, say in third world countries, may not have had access, but today it's very different.
It's not only Melbourne or any of one particular country which is going through this kind of communication without borders. It's across the globe.
The borders have to do with considerations of impartiality, neutrality and independence, which are a lot of big words that we use to say that communicating in a country like Afghanistan, which was the case study today for the panel, it's important to keep those limits or those borders in mind as part of the frame that you use to communicate.
The obstacles are access. Obviously, in a global world, not everyone has the same access to the tools and technologies. I think education around what social media is and how it can be used.
Especially in the government organizations, they're not really into embracing social media as a form of communication.
You can look at the level of adoption rates with the general public of social media, in particular, say Facebook. You can see that a lot of people are using it very, very regularly.
We really have to adapt to new methods, new ways of working, and new standards and new, rigorous ethics.
If you talk about organizations, there are no borders for the organization anymore because messages flow in and out of organizations.
We can control about what we said, but we cannot control what other people said about us. But by controlling about what we said, it automatically will control what people said about us.
Everybody can report on your organization. They might be inside the organization, they might be outside. So we as communicators are presented with some unique challenges on the strategy, on how we might shape and inform that.
If organizations do things which they shouldn't do, there are massive constituencies that can be mobilized to oppose them. But if you think of that positively, just think about the power of harnessing and working with those constituencies.
What that means is we have to think about human rights, we have to think about values, we have to think about integrity, and those are the things that are really essential to really good communications.
Perception management is no longer really what we should be focused on. It's about how do we take real stories and ensure that the authenticity of those stories is not lost in communications.
Whether there's a depth of conversation in Twitter, whether we can engage with the ideas, the questions properly, or whether it's a superficial question.
I think a few people still want to have control of message, still want to stick to sound bites. The nature of it is that form of communication, which is very, very popular for 10 or 20 years, isn't going to work anymore.